Alright, welcome back Space Marines. So today I'm going to give you the definitive version of the patch 10.1 Vanguard Executioner build. This is the one that I've settled on after a lot of testing. And for those of you who watched my last video or the last couple of videos, you'll be pleased to know that I've now removed my webcam, so no flaming me for that this time. You'll be able to see every perk. Let's get started right away here. I've landed on this build finally after many different iterations of this. And this is my favorite one. I think it's the most versatile one. So I'm running the Occulus Bolt Carbine. This one here specifically. ×2 headshot multiplier. It's very good. Perk tree, I start with this one up top. Enemies at a distance of more than 25 meters take 20% damage. 20% more damage. I prefer this specifically because I like to start off far away from the enemies and actually put them down as close to 33% as I possibly can so that I can get in and start my execution chain before I'm surrounded by enemies and they end up blocking me, getting in my way, and so on. So that's why I prefer this one over the bottom tree. I don't like wasting any ammo whatsoever against terminus enemies. I just melee them and parry them and so on. So it's just fine. Once you know their patterns, bosses can't really do much to you. The main issue is having bosses and 3 extremist enemies, so I'd rather focus on something that allows me to exterminate everything around the boss, and then I can focus on the boss and not really have to worry about anything. I'm running the heavy bolt pistol. You can run the heroic bolt pistol as well. I did try this for a while. I ended up coming back to the heavy bolt pistol. I think this is the best version of this build in my opinion. The heavy bolt pistol just has better gun strike damage. The breakpoints that I reviewed a couple of videos ago with the heavy bolt pistol are also still valid in hard stratagems as well. Obviously, there are some modifiers that may change some of the things, but by and large, if you run the heavy bolt pistol, the build and the breakpoints that I went over a couple of videos ago for patch 10.1 will still be valid, even in stratagems. So very worth running, I think. These are the perks that I take on the heavy bolt pistol. So mostly the bottom path, and then I go upwards here for the last one. Headshot damage obviously being very meaningful. And then finally the Power Axe. This is the fencing Power Axe that I'm running. I've been over this one a bunch of times. It's the same thing. We're following the bottom tree after patch 10.1 here. I do go up here just to pick up this melee 5%. This is super important. Tactical retreat. Power backstep deals 25% more damage. If you are unaware, in patch 10.1, the power backstep actually received a 66% damage increase. And so combining that with this plus Cleaver, which gives you a flat damage bonus of 10% against majority or higher enemies. These in combination with the buff just makes this really nice. Power backstep becomes a genuine threat to enemies. And finally, Discharge, the last perk on the bottom tree. This is super important because it's just a quality of life upgrade. What you can do with this is you can basically overhead strike. Overhead strike, for those of you who don't know, by the way, is either sprint melee or dash melee, dodge melee, I should say. So doing an overhead strike on a termagant will automatically guarantee a grapnel execution. That's really good because it is a very reliable way for you to start your execution chains and starts snowballing out of control, basically. And then finally, the perk tree. This is what I'm running here. We'll get into the prestige perks this time as well. So upper hand just allows you to stand your ground more effectively without getting knocked back. Super useful. You kind of need this. This is mandatory in higher difficulties. Otherwise, you will get stun locked. This is how you avoid being stun locked. Conviction, pretty useful. You take 25% less health damage. You could run close combat focus as well. Depends on what you want to do. This is pretty nice though. Consecutive execution, so killing 7 enemies, in rapid succession restores equipment charge. Super valuable. This is the most versatile way to run this build because if you find a Melta bomb or even crack grenades, you're basically set. You'll be able to instantly start execution chains on sorcerers, for example, if you're playing against chaos, or even terminators. The machine gun terminators specifically are pretty annoying when you're playing a Vanguard. This allows you to crack grenade them and just execute them pretty much, starting a chain and healing up 30% if you need to, because of the next perk, which is Unmatched Seal. So this is just probably the best team perk you could get in the game, to be honest with you. Very, very valuable, especially in hard siege mode, especially in absolute mode, especially in hard stratagems. Now, Restless Fortitude. This is what I run because most of the time with this build, I'm going to be using my grapnel launcher to execute. None of the abilities in this column will actually trigger if you proc and execute, meaning if you are playing the build correctly, none of these 3 skills here in this column will actually work for you. So that means that by definition, the only way any of these perks will ever trigger is if I am not playing the build correctly and I've made a mistake. And if I've made a mistake, meaning I've used my grapnel and I've not triggered an execution with it, so I've just used the grapnel and wasted it by kicking someone in the face, then I want to at least know that I can come away with it with some kind of bonus, with some kind of positive, let's say. And so having 40% less range damage is a pretty decent way to compensate for that mistake. Let's put it that way. Zone of impact, you need this. This is mandatory. This is the AoE burst damage when you grapnel execute someone. Thrill of the fight, pretty useful. After a perfectly timed parry, block, or dodge, you take 20% less health damage for 5 seconds. This, plus conviction, plus if you ever do make a mistake and hit Restless Fortitude, I mean, you're not really taking any damage, or at least not any range damage, then you're taking much less melee damage as well. Which melee damage is already not as bad as range damage, let's put it that way, because you can generate armor so effectively on this class, which we will get into in just a second. And then finally, tactical prowess. This is also mandatory, just like Zone of Impact. These 2 perks are what kind of bring the build online, so to speak. So this one allows you to execute enemies when they have less than 33% instead of 25%. So you can execute them sooner, even before they're glowing red, basically, even before they're incapacitated. And this will allow you to trigger your Zone of Impact more frequently. For those of you who don't know, the best way to tell that an enemy is at 33% is lock on to them. If you see a little red indicator as part of the lock-on icon, they are at 33.33% health. Shoot them once to be safe, and you can execute 100% of the time. If you don't shoot them once and you see the little red indicator, there's a very, very, very slight chance, very slight, but still there, that you won't be able to get the execution because they'll be at 33.33% health instead of 33%. Okay, long spiel over. All right, prestige. So what I'm running here is Battlefield Awareness. If a target is within 8 meters, you deal 10% range damage, 10% more range damage, excuse me. So that's pretty useful. This one here is mandatory, Launch Restoration. Using the grapnel launcher restores 1 armor segment. The reason why this is so good is because in combination with Tactical Prowess and Zone of Impact, you can basically chain execute things and always have full armor. The grapnel launcher itself will regenerate 1 of your armor pips, 1 of your armor segments, and then Tactical Prowess, or the execution itself, any execution really will do this, the execution itself will generate the other remaining armor segment. So you will always get 2 armor segments back anytime you execute an enemy with the grapnel launcher. So really, really good. Next, we take Fortitude, so health increased by 15%, pretty strong. And Exigency Charge is what I'm running. You could run whatever you want, really. When my health is less than 25%, my ability charge regenerates 15% faster. If I do end up making a mistake and I waste all of my grapnel launcher charges and I'm low health, at least I know that it's coming back quick enough for me to do something, because I do not run combat readiness, basically. So that is the gist of it. That's the full build. This is what I've settled on. Conversely, you can run Melter Rifle, Heavy Bolt Pistol. You could run it with a knife if you prefer, whatever you want. You could run it with the Heroic Bolt Pistol, but again, the gun strike damage will be a little bit lower. So the breakpoints might be a little different in hard stratagems. If you run it this way, you are 100% sure you're not going to run into any issues. You can clear pretty much any content in the game, no problem. And I've been pretty much trying every iteration of this specific build. This is the one I've landed on to be the most reliable, the most versatile. Against Chaos, I will say that Melter Rifle could come in really, really handy, especially with all the Chaos spawns everywhere, who keep running at you, who keep making it very difficult for you to grapnel because, again, the grapnel launcher, for those of you who don't know, the grapnel launcher has a minimum distance requirement of 10 meters between you and your target for it to be able to be activated, excuse me. And so those Chaos spawns who keep charging at you make that really difficult because they're always point blank to you and you cannot use your grapnel launcher for that reason. So the Melter Rifle could be an interesting answer. That's the gist of it. This is the build. Enjoy. This is the variation that I like the most, the iteration that I like the most. If this was helpful, please like and subscribe. I also stream on Twitch and on YouTube, so feel free to stop by and say hello. Later.